When I was a teen, on Christmas, I received a copy of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World on DVD, a film adaptation of the comic, and this was my first experience with the IP. That summer, when my family and I spent our holidays at a beach town, going fishing, getting ice cream, and swimming, I decided to spend a lot of it watching Scott Pilgrim again and again and again. It played that summer on repeat. Months later, I begged my mum to lend me her credit card to purchase the official Scott Pilgrim game on Xbox Live Arcade. Untold hours sunk into a game that is part of a genre I actually particularly don't like, but I wanted to play regardless. Scott Pilgrim was a story I loved in my teens and was, by my standards, the funniest movie I had seen at the time. Coated with the introverted interests that were at my core. Video games, music, and film baked into this story that felt like it was just made for me. With a very simple yet effective premise. In order to date the girl of his dreams, Ramona, Scott must fight and defeat 7 evil exes. As I watched the behind the scenes and listened to every commentary, I became more aware of the comic the film was based on. I didn't really read comics, so I decided to pay it no mind whatsoever. And it stayed that way for years. Until I turned 24. I became ingrained in reading Japanese manga, and from that was in a rush to read more. So I decided to also look at alternative indie comics from the West, and that is when I returned to Scott Pilgrim. After finishing a read through in less than 2 days, I realized that the movie I had loved all these years was just merely scratching the surface of a comic that was everything I mentioned before, but also something I didn't know I could relate to on a personal level. And it is the reason why I'm making this video. The titular character of Scott Pilgrim is a 23-year-old guy who lives in Toronto, Canada. His days are spent playing video games, freeloading off his gay roommate Wallace, and practicing bass in his crappy little band called Sex Bomb. At this time, he is also dating a 17-year-old Chinese high schooler called Knives Chow, which is a bit odd and really kind of ew and gross, but trust me, this is plot related. Please, it is. Trust me, this isn't a manga. Much of what you see in this comic is pulled from the life stories of its creator, Brian Lee O'Malley. Brian is a creative who has stated that immediate inspiration has helped him create his stories, and so at the time of brainstorming Scott Pilgrim, he was all these things. He was living with his gay friend, playing in a crappy little band, and he was not dating a high schooler, but a fully legal American girl at the time. The American in this story is Ramona Flowers, the iconic love interest of the story and the catalyst for a lot of the oddness in Scott's world. See, you don't really grasp what the story can do until Scott is forced to fight Ramona's first evil ex, Matthew Patel. At first glance, Patel is a young Indian man with an emo haircut and an iconic pirate look, but actually has the power to hurl fireballs and summon demon hipster chicks. The page then emulates a fighting video game showcase with panels of Scott uppercutting and catching Patel in an air combo. The result ends with Scott defeating the ex with the power of friendship, courage, and whatever. Ending with a blow so powerful it turns Patel into coins. The beauty of this comic is that it frames the story of Scott's personal life like a romantic comedy of someone struggling to get their together, but introduces physical conflict in the style of a video game battle shonen. It is one of the strongest aspects of the story, and to show you how O'Malley can emulate this manga feeling in a comic, we have to talk about the artists he learnt it from. But before that, this video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and to sum up, it creates an encrypted tunnel for you to travel within and appear in any server in the world. This allows you to keep your data entries private from anyone looking to take a peek, including your own internet provider. Whether it's placing bids on an unopened copy of Final Fantasy X, or reading random facts on Wikipedia with the boys. Did you know there's a chapel full of burned furniture? Interesting. But even more, Surfshark gets you access to that sweet content only found in other countries. I've been wanting to binge every episode of regular show, but don't have access to HBO Max in my country. A couple easy clicks later, and I'm watching the boys struggle to keep the park clean. I'm trying to watch an obscure anime only available on Retro Crush in the US. Surfshark? Too easy. As far as my internet provider is concerned, I'm chilling in sunny California watching Gunsmith Cats, and I didn't even have to fly. And today, Surfshark is offering a deal when you sign up using the code Mugen. Access to 100 countries, unlimited devices, 24/7 support, and a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. All you have to do is go to surfshark.deals/Mugen and get started with the link in the description. You will receive an exclusive 5 months free, so try it out now. That's surfshark.deals/Mugen. Okay, on with the video. In 2001, when O'Malley was creating his first major comic, Lost at Sea, his same roommate brought home a manga titled Even a Monkey Can Draw Manga, which in Japanese is abbreviated as Saruman, which, yeah, that checks out. Saruman is a manga series that was published in 1989, created by Koji Aihara and Kentaro Takakuma. Although today the concept of manga creation is less of a mystery, in the 90s and mid-2000s, for the rest of the world, it was virtually unknown. This manga, however, portrays the creation of manga as satire, using the duo creators as the main characters, ridiculing the state of the industry under the guise that it is actually quite simple to succeed. One such panel details the method to creating a very successful battle shonen manga, which just shows a visual diagram of a shish kebab representing story beats, and each shish kebab is labeled fight, 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 fight. Despite its jabs at mangaka who make the same formulaic stories, promoting low-tier plagiarism and getting naked to practice drawing the human body, the manga actually has advice. There are practices when it comes to bordering, illustrations, and story design. O'Malley credits this book in helping him attain the style of manga that is present in the Scott Pilgrim comic, and even did an interview with its duo creators years later who had also enjoyed reading Scott Pilgrim. Quote, "In general, the wide exploration of genres in monkey manga was inspirational to me, even if you were joking around." Takakuma and Aihara mentioned that when they were reading Scott Pilgrim, they noticed that it wasn't a manga, but was very much influenced by it, as it uses its strengths to cultivate its own identity, rather than try and adhere to the tropes that have become apparent back in the 90s, 2000s, and even today. Quote, "I did feel the inspiration from Japanese manga, but it did not strike me as a rip-off of manga style, but a very unique way of expression. I found it a very interesting work. I appreciated you using your own style of expression." Brian, at the time of conceptualizing Scott Pilgrim, was already aware of anime and manga culture, first watching many series and then eventually getting his hands on some physical manga, as he was already an avid comic book fan. The series he mentions that has had a lot of impact on him in his style is the series Ranma Half, a manga created by Rumiko Takahashi, known for other works like Urusei and Inuyasha. This can be seen in the chibi-like style of Brian's characters, and also the story the characters are inside, following an almost absurd romantic comedy/harem. Since finishing Scott Pilgrim, O'Malley has cited many different artists of the manga world he is a fan of. By looking at their styles and approach to art, you can start to see the character designs that Brian had taken mild influences from, or why he's a fan of them in general and how it reflects his work and what he likes about it. The reason that the comic was published in black and white was because of O'Malley's love for manga is actually a misconception. He merely stated that it was too expensive to color in the panels, so he maintained the strengths and aesthetics of black and white comics. It's one of the reasons why I personally love the Scott Pilgrim comic. I read Scott Pilgrim before I read a lot of manga I read now, and now looking back and doing this video, I could see so many different influences and inspiration that aren't really at the front of what makes it great, but it is a part of its identity. The influence from manga in his character designs and battle double page spreads are actually just one half of what makes the comic a unique piece of fiction and art. The other side is O'Malley's love for Western comics, specifically alternative comics. His first exposure to the other side of comics happened when he found a copy of the series Bone, a comic about a little guy called Phone Bone, characterized in the style of a Saturday morning paper comic strip, but infused with styles of dark fantasy as well. After this entry point, O'Malley then read comics like Hicksville and It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken. You can feel that while Scott Pilgrim does use fantastical panels of action for a shonen, its basis in a world where when people die they turn into coins is unique, and can be attributed to its comic DNA. But this side of Scott Pilgrim is also the informal influences of the things Brian loved in his life: video games and indie rock. O'Malley played many video games when he was younger, and you can feel each one he mentions to be shown in some aspect of Scott's world. The scoring system of a fighting game from Street Fighter, the experience points gained and level up achievements of Final Fantasy, pixel font from Fatal Fury. The Clash at Demon Head is both a video game reference to Clash at Demon Head, but also the English rock band The Clash, hard emphasis on the. Scott Pilgrim's name is the name of a song from Plumtree, and the lyrics are large inspirations for the story. Scott can be seen wearing a shirt with the band's name on it, both in the comic and film. Brian's love for indie rock is not only present in the fact that he was in a band, he listens to a lot of it, and Scott is in a band, but also how he represents music. It's used as a form of expression. It's used as a form of battling. Even in the first volume, he created a song that people can play at home with the chords, the iconic Launchpad McQuack. While not directly referenced, these interests cultivate a mixture of what Scott's world kind of is. At one point in the story, Scott laments when given a skateboard as a victory reward. He wishes he had chosen different proficiencies when growing up so that he could actually use it. An obvious remark on the skill attribute system in RPGs. In another scene, Scott asks what that glowing thing is over there, but then verified by Kim and Steven Stills, it's a save point, to which Scott panics to use before he comes face to face with his big X, Envy. Yeah, maybe we'll get to that later in the video. These ideas of the character receiving experience points in life just by doing everyday tasks and achieving certain goals specific to themselves is never truly addressed, as it is not a notion uncommon or not directly noticed by the characters of this world as being weird. Because it isn't a big deal. And them not being a big deal is the angle that makes that which is Scott Pilgrim, Scott Pilgrim. Many stories in other media would have characters make note of it or comment how bizarre and weird it is that there's a save point, basically to make the audience feel like they're not out of their depth and that they're not weirded out because the characters also feel weirded out. Basically what Marvel does with every single movie. But that technique of delivering information can actually break the immersion and make the audience realize that they're watching and reading a story that wants to say to you, hey, this isn't real. Which in my opinion is already obvious and shouldn't need to be addressed, as the audience should be able to understand that this is the world these characters live in if it's communicated well by them just existing in it. The fact that no one comments at how a dude shooting fireballs just got obliterated into $2.10 shows that. There are one-liners that showcase how the characters are aware that something is not natural in their world, but it's mostly character specific. One such instance is in the movie when Scott is being chewed out by Julie. He keeps mentioning how as she's swearing that there's a censor bar appearing on her mouth.
And by the way, I can't believe you asked Ramona out after I specifically told you not to do that.
How are you doing that with your mouth?
Never mind how I'm doing it.
How the is she doing that? The anime directly addresses the Street Fighter sounding announcer as a confused bit before a fight begins.
Fight!
Who said that?
Nobody?
The idea of all of this not being a big deal is also centered around the nonchalant nature of the characters' lives in the bustling but also rather ordinary city of Toronto. Scott's dialogue with his friends and other characters is layered like a dialogue scene from coming-of-age films, as a lot of what characters may discuss is actually around the idea of nothings, maybes, and what-ifs. Think of when you were younger, when you had conversations with friends about just random shit, and when you think back on those memories, you don't remember what you talked about, you just remember having fun and talking about something. An example is Scott talking to Ramona about this Mexican restaurant he loved that eventually got shut down. It says a lot about his character, but at the same time doesn't. It's a very easy, simple dialogue scene to just forget. Other kinds of dialogue is very much centered on the relationships between characters. Even though this is an action-packed music epic, relationships both ordinary and romantic are the basis of the story's themes. Scott's relationship with his friends and roommate are the first instances of how we can start to understand his character. Scott has been described in two different ways by the fans and audiences who have experienced some form of Scott Pilgrim media. He is a lovable idiot, and he's an asshole. These two statements, I think, are great entry points into why Scott is a fascinating character, even though he may not appear to be at the beginning. Scott is 23 and has no job and no aspirations really to become famous through his band. Scott is a slacker of the positive variety. If he is just able to play bass, video games, and eat food, that is all he needs. He isn't particularly good at anything besides being the strongest fighter in his province of Toronto, Canada. To survive the day-to-day, he uses Wallace's credit card to purchase food, order something nonsensical like a CD from Amazon so he can meet the girl of his dreams. But his conflict comes from something he doesn't realize quite clearly, and it's his want for companionship. He has had many relationships through the years, and some of the people he has had relations with are still present in his life, like the drummer of the band, Kim Pine. Others, however, did not end so well for him. Scott is a friend that you just have around because you have had great times together, even if you wish they would become a little more self-reliant, respectful, or considerate. But Scott is someone who, despite not being very well put together in his life, is still happy in it, and will fight to be with someone he feels a connection with, or to protect those he's close to. I think it is one of the most relatable things about Scott. He is someone who is wandering, and I think it is something you experience in your 20s. Some people may have a part-time job while they study, some others might be starting their first major job. Regardless, both might be trying to figure out what it is they actually want in life. The rest of your time is spent trying to manage your relationships, friends, family gatherings, and of course meeting new people romantically. A lot of your time with people either physically or online is some of the most interesting times when you're in your 20s. You are more responsible for yourself than you ever have been, and sometimes that is terrifying but also liberating. You don't mind sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor, eating 2-minute noodles for lunch every day or every meal. It's one of the reasons that the comic has continued to find new audiences throughout the years, either through new adaptations or just getting older. The weird time of being in your 20s can be relatable having been through them, but also for people growing up as they may identify with the other aspects of Scott. A lot of the fight scenes in the comic were not as lengthy as I remembered, and when they were taking place, I almost was more interested in the dialogue that surrounded the fight more than the fight itself. The verbal jabs between Ramona and Envy is a good example. It was then I kind of realized I enjoyed reading the comic when I was 24, and again now, not for the action or for the video game aesthetics and references. That was just the gateway. This time, it was the relationships of the characters and how I felt about each of them. Brian being so obsessed with the city of Toronto reminded me of the times I spent living in the city where I studied. I was making friends at my work and at uni who were all very different characters themselves, some that I would love to make a video about. Those colourful cast of characters are present in this comic too, even if people seem emotionless. And every character in Scott Pilgrim you can relate to in some way. Take a look at Stephen Stills, the talented singer of Sex Bob-omb. He is constantly scared and terrified that the band sucks and needs to get more gigs and exposure, but the more people that they're in front of might mean they just actually suck more. Stephen Stills is that very self-conscious side that works to feed their passion, but also is dreadfully terrified of learning that you just may not be good at the thing you love at all, leaving you to vomit profusely in the men's toilets. Kim plays the drums of Sex Bob-omb because it is an outlet for emotions, particularly anger. She is also one of Scott's exes who feels very annoyed by his antics and dating other people. Their relationship ended when Scott had to move to Toronto in high school. Kim can be that side that just wants something to let out our emotions, whether it be through music, writing, sports, anything. She represents part of the situation of being around someone they used to have a relationship with. And this can show the negatives of that, but also the positives of just being friends. Wallace, well, he's Wallace. No one else is like him. I mean, come on. Knives herself, being only 17, shares a similar coming-of-age arc like the other characters. Even though the rest of the cast are all older, they are just as lost as she is, while she deals with her overabundant love for Scott despite his indifference. Knives may be the most relatable in the romantic aspect. Having a crush that feels so genuine and real, you just keep telling yourself that this person and you are right for each other. But that is the essence of a crush. So that it feels right, but it's through rose-tinted glasses. As Knives doesn't really admit to herself that Scott wasn't a good boyfriend to her. He cheats on her without her knowledge after meeting Ramona, and then breaks up with her out of pressure from Wallace. He destroys her heart, but doesn't blame him for it, as it's her first love. And And we'll get back to the 17-year-old thing, trust me. It'll make sense, trust me, I am not coping. It's part of us now even when you're older, where you try to make excuses for the ones you love. Blaming others like Ramona, who also has an arc and issues of her own. Ramona does feel like that person who you know nothing about, but you want to know more of anyway. She's reserved, but not afraid to speak her mind. To everyone and even the reader, she seems to have her life the most put together. She's got a good paying job, she's good at it, she does what she wants when she wants. She is similar to Scott in that way, but just hides these insecurities and issues a little better. And she does it through her hair. Ramona changes her hair multiple times throughout the series as a choice of style, and this is one of those lifts from Brian's life, as he dated a girl who did the same thing. But the trick of it was how it added to her character. When you were younger, and even throughout your life, you are constantly trying to define yourself intentionally or unintentionally. What you wear, where you buy from, what you listen to, what you watch, read, consume, what you eat, drive, see, or spend. And especially when you alter your appearance. Ramona's past is something she's always trying to outrun, and I imagine rightly so if you have 7 evil exes over your shoulder. But she deals with that by moving away somewhere else, changing her hair, essentially trying to change who you are. But that isn't true. If I change my hair color, or I get piercings, tattoos, or start wearing a different style of clothing, I am still the same person if I haven't made any meaningful change, or if I feel like this change doesn't bring out who I feel inside. Ramona's stages of changing are a facade for real growth, and deep down, I think she knows that. She arguably has the least amount of character change in the series. One of the reasons is because she has very little interaction with her exes that Scott faces, save a few. This is something that they alter in the anime adaptation, and is one of the best things about it. But that being said, I would still say Ramona has great change in the story. The change is just much more subtle. It goes hand in hand with her rejection of the past, because again, in your 20s, you make mistakes, but also try to forget everything before then. And for some people, it's easier to run away and forget about them than face them. And the reason for that is because exes are weird. If you have any, you know what I mean. They are people you have all this intimate history with, and then from breakup, you suddenly become strangers again. But still maybe see them if in school, college, friend circles, or work. They can be mutual, and you can still have civil conversations with them, and even in some cases, you can remain friends. But some are bad. People make mistakes and say things that they don't mean, but by then the damage is done. And exes can then become, in your eyes, the walking representation of hell itself on this good earth. They suck the joy out of you upon seeing their visage. Even hearing their name can make any meal unbearable, even bacon. The nicest cup of coffee is sucked from your stomach upon remembering that date. Exes are fucking evil, and Scott Pilgrim has them in spades. Scott's last big breakup was with a girl called Envy Adams. Envy is malicious and cold towards Scott, seemingly for trying to move on, and even teases him as being a heartbreaker. After Envy dumped Scott, he was virtually a zombie for months. Breakups do that, man. It is shown in a later volume that Envy is dating Todd Ingram, Ramona's third evil ex, and his mind powers of being vegan. I will not spoil how that ends. Please go read this. Todd in this arc of the series is a character who believes he can do whatever he wants, regardless of the consequences. Punch a hole in the moon, cheat, and worse, eat gelato. Todd is a cheater and lies to everyone, showing that a lie in a relationship can multiply. And if you lie to someone in a relationship, you are in a way thinking you're better than them. Todd isn't that complex as a villain, and it is something that the series struggles with partially. To me, the exes are comically or casually evil. They feel wronged by Ramona one way or another to create this group of people to stop her from having happiness because she destroyed theirs either recently or years ago. Breakups suck, but they shouldn't suck that much that you're driven to do this. The exes work as villains because they reflect Scott's character. Scott learns something from each battle about himself and Ramona, who is very guarded about her past. The past can do that to us. Ramona wants to run from it and be different from her past. And the exes are the opposite. They refuse to forget. They stop themselves from moving on because they can't let go that they have been hurt, and that's not healthy. Scott is someone that can become exactly like these exes, burnt from a breakup so badly that they instead blame the other person. O'Malley has this great way of showing how messy breakups can be, even if real life does not involve an angry Chinese dad slashing through a cable car. Let me know in the comments if that's happened to you. But this is the core of Scott Pilgrim, the relationships we foster and how they can slowly change us in the worst and even the best ways. The best example of all of this again is Scott himself. While Ramona runs from her past and the exes can't forget it, Scott does something else. He forgets the past. Scott's attitude of being positive in life is partially attributed to his forgetfulness. At first, his forgetfulness is a lovable trait, and one that can be seen as just a slight annoyance to the other characters. Scott sleeps in and constantly forgets the time and date. He forgets the name of one of the exes he is meant to fight. He doesn't remember his own sister's phone number. He mistakes people with glasses as the final evil ex Gideon Graves. He doesn't recall what his relationships were kind of like in the beginning. He forgets Lisa, the girl that formed the band that she, Kim, and Scott would be a part of. Justice for Lisa. Please put her in an adaptation, I swear to God, Brian. He is asked by Ramona to empty the dishwasher as his only task for the day, only for him to yell that she's forgotten her phone and then proceed to play games on it all day, forgetting about the dishwasher until she comes home. He is forgetful, but it is this aspect that makes people feel he's an asshole. Scott, when first meeting Ramona and having a date with her, he is technically still dating Knives in the first volume. He ends up cheating on her by kissing Ramona and doesn't break up with her before or straight after this because A, he forgot, but also B, does not want to make someone feel shitty like he felt after Envy, which actually answers a question. Why is Scott dating a 17-year-old? To make ourselves not feel so alone and empty, we seek comfort and companionship. That is the first major conflict of Scott's character. He's alone. And sometimes we find companionship with the first person that shows you any sign of attraction or interest, even if it's someone who is young and naive. Scott's sister even asks if this relationship is genuine or just some sort of coping mechanism. And even Scott doesn't know. He likes that it's just simple, it's not complicated. She's a high schooler with very ordinary friends and a very ordinary life. She has no baggage, she has no resentment for him, it's easy. Of course, this relationship does not end well and of course fucks with Knives' mental health. But the cherry on the cake as to why Scott could just be another evil ex is that memory. To talk more, I want to show amazing panels and dialogue that are very much spoilers of the later part of the story. I've debated about whether or not to get to this part of the video and how to show it. So this is the point of no return. If you want to read Scott Pilgrim yourself, skip here. In the last volume, Scott is living alone as Ramona has disappeared, running away again. To cope, Scott spends his days and nights on the couch playing what looks like a PSP Go. I'm pretty sure it's PSP Go. You're just sitting on the couch, eating Doritos, trying to find that next shrine in Breath of the Wild, constantly trying to forget the pain. But this doesn't work. Scott has dreams of being impaled by Ramona and devoured by his exes, who he each encounters before the last arc of the story. Scott sees Knives again, who is now 18, which makes Scott more aware of how kinda bizarre it was for a 23-year-old to date someone so young.
Which, technically is legal in Canada.
They end up having a genuine, meaningful conversation, and Knives asks Scott if he remembers much of their relationship. Scott's only memory is this childish idolization of their time together. Knives decides to shed light that he was quite obviously not the best boyfriend. Later, Scott comes into contact with Envy again, who is in town for an opening. She acts really civil with him and tries to be genuine. Scott believes Envy is here to get back with him, but after the proposition of casual sex, Envy asks if Scott actually remembers anything about their relationship. The exact same colorful memory panel is used as he tries to remember what it was like. She asks then if he remembers the fight on New Year's Eve that he started, which resulted in their breakup. He rebuttals with a harsh line of, "I remember you breaking my heart." A line I was shocked Scott to say. Someone who just wants to not be hurt would say something so harsh. But Envy replies, "The feeling is somewhat mutual." That is not the story we've been hearing. At Wallace's behest to go into nature and clear his mind, Scott goes to visit Kim, his friend and oldest ex. Before this, when talking with Kim, their relationship has evolved. Scott has apologized in a previous chapter for being such an awful friend. And as they chat in the wilderness, Scott comments how he isn't sure how to be an adult. Kim confirms he doesn't, but it might just take some practice. Due to a kiss, the conversation of their past comes up, and it is a trifecta. Scott tries to recall why they broke up. He had to move to Toronto. A panel of Scott breaking the news to her is something we had seen before. But then Kim further explains that she only found out from their friend Lisa, and that Kim had to bring it up to him, essentially postponing their breakup until the very last second, to avoid hurting Kim, but hurting her even more because he didn't tell her. O'Malley showed us a panel, but the context was hidden. Scott obviously does not remember it this way, and then he urges them to forget about it and just move on. Exes are not fucking awful, evil people, and that's part of what Scott Pilgrim shows in its latter half, because the context of both sides wasn't there. Breakups are messy, and there are always two sides to both stories. Brian just made it so with Scott's memory, and as an unreliable narrator, we thought we knew what kind of person Envy, Kim, and Knives were, but we don't really. And that says a lot about Scott's personality. The same with the evil exes. Ramona tries to forget them too, and so their side does not matter, as in their eyes, Ramona was awful and doesn't deserve happiness. Ramona, when she learns of Scott's actions, especially the fact that he cheated on Knives with her, and comments that he is just another ex waiting to happen. Scott's actions and treatment of breaking hearts earned him this fan view of being an asshole. And I can see why. Scott makes really poor decisions by being an unreliable narrator and forgetting his past mistakes by just repeating them. But I think there is something very important that people forget. It is fine to have opinions about characters, but with Scott, he isn't an asshole. He isn't an evil person. These kinds of people do things with malicious intent. They use people. They think they are above others. They don't care whom they hurt or control, even if it's their partner. Brian had this to say when a viewer asked why Scott's an asshole.
Someone said, Brian, why is Scott an asshole? I don't think Scott's an asshole. I think he's a fool. I don't know. I think it's a different thing. The story is about how you can unintentionally do harm. I mean, that's part of it, for sure. You don't have to be a real full-time asshole to be someone who can do harm to other people.
Scott is a fool. He doesn't do any of this out of malice to hurt people because he wants to. Just like everyone else has so much insecurity that he does it unknowingly. And these insecurities and forgetfulness and painful memories manifest in his alter ego. Have you ever said something so awful to someone unintentionally and you don't realize how much that probably fucked up their day? And I think that's okay if you have, because when you're in your 20s, again, you're going to make the most mistakes more than any other time in your life. And when we fuck up, we try to forget all the dumb things we did, especially when we were young, and especially as we get older. The exes stew on the past, so they never move on, whereas Scott always tries to forget the past, so he also can never move on. Scott's memory is a coping mechanism, and until he learns to accept his past actions, he is doomed to repeat them. That is the beauty of Scott's character. He begins to truly understand his impact on his relationships and how he is responsible for their endings. Scott and Ramona are characters who do not always have the easiest relationship to an outsider. They have traits of not communicating effectively. A lot of that is attributed to both their pasts, but it is normal to work through these. A lot of romance stories can always be boiled down to communication, and some people can get tired of that, but it's also essentially why conflict arises in relationships. And communicating is hard sometimes, and it's work. And that's also what relationships are. Not just romantic ones. Family, friends, even pets. They take work, but if you think it is worth it regardless of some heartache, you gotta try. With some exceptions, don't run back to an abusive ex or anything. But Scott and Ramona aren't perfect. They admit they have both hurt people in their past and they can always work through it. It can be messy. The time in your 20s or any period of your life can feel messy and not grounded. Growing up watching the Scott Pilgrim film and looking back, I realize as an adaptation, it is not the same story as the comics in what it is about. That film is a film about insecurities and how we view ourselves having self-respect. And the comic is about how we can be better, how we can accept who we are. There is a great video by James Woodall on the Pilgrim adaptations that made me realize this, and I would urge you to go watch it. I think I needed that movie when I watched it. Being a 12-year-old, you have a lot of insecurities, but now with this comic, it made me feel more grounded when I saw characters try to manage their lives like everyone else around me. There is no handbook to growing up, especially as you get older and change and make choices you might regret. Scott Pilgrim can capture moments of loss and loneliness in our lives that anyone at any age can relate to, and it's these moments that feel like they last forever when everything just sucks. Everything sucks. Everything. But then you have some bacon, and as Wallace says, everything doesn't suck, because bacon and other things exist. It's one thing I really identify with Scott when he said that he doesn't feel like he knows the correct way to grow up. I think we should all admit that we don't. If you don't know what you're meant to do, where you're meant to be, and who it is you want to find, you'll get there. It just takes practice.
Hey, you want to try playing something together?
But how do I know which notes to play?
It's up to you. That's why they call it play.
Thank you so much for watching and making it to the end of the video. This was a very ambitious video, more in its editing and technical aspect, but also a lot of research, but I'm really happy I did it anyway. If you really enjoyed the video, feel free to like and comment below what you thought and any other sides of Scott Pilgrim you want to talk about. Subscribing always helps, and if you're feeling more generous, I do have a Patreon down in the description if you want to support videos like this. I have a single tier for $2 Australian. That being said, I want to thank the patrons who have supported this video. Big Nerd, Lenoriel, Sentinel16, Elf, and Andrew Goss. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. As of now, I've also created a Discord that you can find in the description below, as well as the bio of the channel. Feel free to stop by if you want to. But that's all from me. Again, thank you so much for watching to the end. My name is Mugen. As always, have a good one.